heard this morning that David White asked for a show of hands on people that were from Kansas. Is that right? Well, I'm going to raise my hand, okay? So I don't know if you can see that, but I heard there weren't many hands, but now maybe we've doubled the number of hands that went up this morning. Is that right? I hear a few Kansans back there. I'm here to talk to you about the little word why. Why are you in a position of leadership? And everybody in this room is probably in a position of leadership in some capacity, maybe a division, a department, a company, a ministry, a not-for-profit. But most all of us are in some kind of position of leadership. So it begs the question, why? And why is simply the cause, reason, or purpose for something. So what is the cause, reason, or purpose for you being in the position of leadership that you're in? Let me propose to you a very simple answer, and then I'll unpack it a little bit. This may not be the answer you're expecting. I think you're in a position of leadership to replace yourself. You say, wait a minute, Russ, I've worked hard to get in this position of leadership, now I'm supposed to replace myself? Let me tell you why I think that's the case. There's a couple of reasons for that. First of all, whatever your position of leadership, you're only going to be in it for a limited amount of time. It may be 60 years like Truett Cathy, or it may be 6 years or 10 or 15 years, but whatever it is, you're in your position of leadership for a limited amount of time while you're on your stage of action. So as a result of that, you need to see your position as God-given and that you're a steward and a caretaker of whatever it is you're leading. See, at the end of the day, it's not about you. It's not about me as a leader. It's about those who are going to come after us because, see, the mission of whatever you're leading is more important than you. Think about your family for a minute. What's the only mark you leave to the next generation? Children are the living messages we send to a time we will not see. You catch that? So it behooves me to invest and replace myself and pour values into the next generation because that's the only mark I leave. The only way you know you're successful as a leader is you're able to replace yourself so that whatever you're leading carries on after you're gone. If the ministry, the business, the department, or whatever is not better than when you started leading, the question is, did you really ever lead? Unfortunately, in many cases, it's more about us than it is about what we're leading. But as Charles de Gaulle said, our graveyards are full of indispensable men, and I will also add women. See, none of us are indispensable. So when you ask the question, why? What's my reason for leading? Is to replace myself. I know we have some Edge mentoring group, and I heard you're on this right side over here. And so leaders pour into the next generation of leaders, then they need to begin to think about the next generation because what you're leading is more important than you. It's not about you. How did I learn this? Well, I grew up on a farm, like I said, in Kansas, and I've got a good supporter back here that keeps going, I appreciate that. And, growing up in that agrarian situation, you learn how to work hard, and you produce, and you perform, and you accomplish things, and you have some success. And so that was kind of my modus operandi. I worked really hard. I had some success on the basketball court, received many college offers, and was a leader of the team. And I thought, well, that's what leaders do. They perform and they produce. They're better than other people, and they get ahead of other people, and then other people report to them. So that was my paradigm on leadership. I had a very successful 4-H flock of sheep and won the state sheep contest one year. And so I thought, here again, you produce, you perform, you get ahead. That's how you lead. I graduated from high school, went off to Kansas State University. I can say that now since they finally played football a little bit, but I went off to Kansas State and and after I graduated, I had a basketball team I coached, and we had some success. And so I was beginning to build this idea that leadership was about producing and performing and getting out ahead and leading other people and having other people report to you. My mom liked to say, Crossons are bosses. We're the boss. We tell other people what to do. So that was kind of how I was growing up. And so then I go to Atlanta, Georgia in 1980 and go to work with this fledgling financial services company, Ronald and Company, and started off, and lo and behold, in 6 years, 1986, I'm 33 years old, and I become the chief operating officer. Ron asked me to become the number 2 guy in the firm, and I'm thinking, this is just like I expected it to be. You work hard, you produce, you perform, and you get the lead. That's what leaders do. And so 1986 to 1992, number 2 guy in the firm, chief operating officer, had our very best year in 1992. Received a phone call in August of 1993, and the person on the other end said that, Russ, the board decided that you're no longer going to be the number 2 guy in the firm. You're going to be in charge of training, have a couple people reporting to you, and by the way, we're going to cut your income in half. And I'm sitting there thinking, what just happened? Where did this come from? Didn't I really understand leadership? After all, I led the company to its most successful year in the history of the company in 1992, and I'm sitting there holding the phone thinking, what in the world just happened? Wasn't leadership about performance and production? And see, the word I want you to write down that happened at that point, which I think is a prerequisite for any great godly leader, is humility. And I think we either humble ourselves or God in His infinite grace to us will humble us. And that was my humbling experience. The wind all went out of my sails. And I spent the next 10 years from 92 to 2002 in what I call my wilderness experience, learning what true godly leadership really was. And in 2002, the board of directors asked me to come back and be the CEO. And what I want to share with you is some of the things I learned during that 10 years and even the 12 years since then. Remember I said earlier that it's not about you as a leader, it's about replacing yourself? My experience on the farm and then my success in athletics and all that had made the focus on me. I thought it was about me. But that humility that I had to go through rooted that out and made me realize that it wasn't about me, that it was about the entity that I was privileged to lead. Remember, you're a leader over something that you've been entrusted with for a limited amount of time. And that was the big aha for me, was that I had been entrusted with something and it wasn't about me. The mission and the entity was bigger than me, and I needed to be a steward of that. And humility was the prerequisite for beginning to understand that. I thought I was ready to run the company in 86. I thought I was equipped to run the company in 92. But it wasn't until 2002 that I learned some of these things I'm getting ready to share with you that I was really able then to lead. So humility is a prerequisite. Now, what are the couple of things that I learned? What I learned was that to be a good leader, and the next word you want to write down is the word follower. To be a good leader, you have to be a good follower. I was a lousy follower. And how would I describe followership? Followership is described as getting there one step ahead of your leader, one step ahead of your boss, and making your boss look good. I was horrible at that from 86 to 92, thus my demotion. So I would say to you young folks out here that are aspiring to be leaders, you're starting on your leadership trek, learn how to be a great follower. And by the way, there's a verse on that. Proverbs 27:18 says, "He who cares for his master will be honored." I wish I'd read that verse in 86, because I didn't have a clue. I thought the way you got ahead was you performed and produced, you showed yourself to be smarter than your boss, and you would gradually be promoted. In fact, sometimes if you made your boss look bad, that was even better. But it's just the opposite of that. Followers get there one step ahead of their boss, they anticipate where they're going, and they make them look good. Proverbs 27:18. I love the leadership team we have at Ronald Blue & Company because the folks that report to me get this. And I will say to you, if you're in a follower position now, that the leaders that are watching you are looking to see, are you getting there one step ahead of me? Are you thinking? Are you getting out there ahead of me and making my life easier? That's a sure way to advance in this issue of leadership. I'd say the second thing I would say to followers is this, that you have to grow in influence. And the way you grow in influence is to show good judgment and good decision making, but here's the way it usually works. Usually as a follower, you look at the decisions the leaders are making and what do you say? Now, none of you have probably ever done this. That's a stupid decision. What in the world are they thinking? Have any of you ever done that with the people ahead of you? That's what I was doing. I was standing at the water cooler and I'd murmur and I'd complain and I'd gripe about the decisions being made. Here's what I want to let you in on a little secret. for you followers. Leaders don't set out to make bad decisions. But the area of decision making is always bigger than the area of knowledge. So they make the best decision they can given the facts they have, so it's incumbent upon you as a follower to figure out how you can help them make better decisions. You get it? To be a great follower, which will be a prerequisite to being a leader, you make your boss look good and you grow in influence and help them make better decisions. So what are the 2 or 3 things I would say to those of you that are in a leadership position? First of all, as a leader, you need to not be afraid to strengthen others. Do not be afraid to strengthen others. Many times we're intimidated when we have people under us, these folks that are advancing quickly, and we tend to put them down and maybe not let them have as much rope as we should. And here's what's wrong with that. Remember, if the entity and the mission is bigger than you, then the better people you can have will keep the mission alive and well long after you're gone. So you really want people that are better than you. You want people that can carry on the mission into the next generation. So you cannot be intimidated by strength in others. I remember a church situation I was aware of where, and this happens a lot of times, you had the senior pastor, you had the youth pastor that came along, and he was obviously a gifted orator and communicator, and it was very obvious he had leadership skills. But instead of allowing that person to advance, the senior pastor was intimidated by the youth pastor, and so what happened was he began to stifle him, not give him the rope he needed to continue to advance, to help the ministry continue to advance. So pretty soon that person was lost, and what happened to the ministry is it went in a 10-year flatline, all because the senior pastor was intimidated by the strength in the young pastor. This is true not only in ministries, but in businesses. You find really good people and don't be intimidated by their strength. That's one characteristic of a great leader. A second characteristic of a great leader is that you accept feedback that's contrary to what you may want to hear. Write down 1 Kings 22. There's a story in 1 Kings 22 that depicts this very nicely. It seems that the king of Israel wanted to go up and take back the land of Aram from the Arameans, and so he went to the king of Judah, Jehoshaphat, and said, "Hey, Jehoshaphat, will you go with me to go up and destroy the Arameans?" And Jehoshaphat says, "Well, are we going to have success? Are we going to be able to have victory?" And the king of Israel said, "Well, I asked these 400 prophets, and they said, yes, we would have victory." And Jehoshaphat said, "Well, is there a man of the Lord we could inquire of that, to get another source of input?" And the king of Israel said, "Well, there's this other guy, but I hate him because he tells me what I don't want to hear. And I don't like him." But they said, "Okay, we need to hear from him." So they sent the messenger to go get Micaiah. So the messenger goes to get Micaiah to bring him back to the kings. And they bring him back. And on the way over there, the messenger says to Micaiah, "Hey, Micaiah, here's the party line. The other 400 guys have said the kings are going to have success, so you need to stick with the party line if you know what's good for you." And Micaiah said, "I'm only going to say what the Lord tells me to say to the king." So he gets back, he goes up in front of the kings, and the king said, "Micaiah, are we going to have success when we go up against the Arameans?" And what do you think Micaiah said? He said, "Yes." Now, why did he say that? See, if you're not a great leader, if you're not a godly leader, you will create an environment where people don't feel comfortable telling you the truth. And one of the things that great leaders do is they create an environment where they can hear the truth. And so the first thing Micaiah says is, "Yeah, you're going to have success." He kind of went with the party line, even though he really didn't believe that. They said, "Tell us what you really think, Micaiah." Micaiah said, "Okay, you want to know? You're going to get killed and you aren't going to have success." The king of Israel said, "See, I told you. He speaks evil against me," and they so go put him in prison. Sometimes the people that tell you what you don't want to hear are the most loyal to the vision because they care so deeply about what's going on. And many times we misinterpret disagreement as lack of loyalty, and it's really not. It's anything but that. The people that care the most about keeping the mission alive of whatever you're leading will be willing to tell you the hard things. So Micaiah went to prison, and guess what happened? King of Israel, got pierced through with an arrow. You know the story. So great leaders are not afraid to strengthen others. They're willing to accept input. I think a third thing that you can write down about great leaders is they keep the fire of the mission of whatever they're leading alive. We're going to talk with Dan Cathy here in a few minutes, and one thing I love about Dan is that passion and that fire burns within him. You know, I get kind of laughed at Ronald Company because I go around and I think everybody needs a financial plan, and by the way, you do. That's how you get financial peace of mind, so you can do what's important in God's kingdom and don't have your finances be an issue. But that's my passion, because I've seen the impact it's had on people's lives. Well, that's what great leaders do, more so than skill and all of that. And so back to you edge mentoring folks over here, one of the things that will allow you to advance quickly, more so than skills and aptitudes and abilities, I think, is this burning passion of the mission of whatever you're about. Because I know as a leader, that's what I look for in the followers behind me, because one day I'm going to exit. One day you're going to exit from your position of leadership, just like Truett Cathy just exited a couple months ago. You're going to exit from your position of leadership, and you want to make sure somebody else takes that baton and carries the fire of that mission until the Lord returns. See, if you think it's about you as a leader and don't think that way, then whatever you're leading will die when you do. Then I would ask the question, if that happens, did you really ever lead? Think about that. If whatever you're leading doesn't continue on, were you ever leading, or were you just performing while on your stage of action? We have a lot of leaders that are really hidden as performers because there's nobody coming after them to keep the mission alive and well. Let me give you one last thing in the couple minutes I have left. As another thing that I would say to leaders. And this is a word that I'd never heard, and maybe you haven't heard it either, but I think it's a great descriptor of what leaders do, and that's they live their lives with isopraxism. How many of you have heard that word before? I see less hands than I see Kansas hands. Okay, so now you have a word you can share with your spouse when you go home tonight, isopraxism. You say, where in the world did that word come from? I've never heard it. I hadn't heard it either, but I was reading Sports Illustrated, one of those great sources of input, and it's got an athletic connotation. And isopraxism is simply the idea that those you're leading are taking their cues from you. Your body language, the things you say, and how you respond to both the good times and the bad times, they're picking up on. You know, the baseball pitcher who has an air behind him, how he responds on the mound affects the whole team. The quarterback who has a pass dropped out in the flat, does he hang his head or hold his head or kick the ground? The team takes their cues from you, the leader. I had a chance to practice this back in 08-09. Anybody remember what happened in 08-09? Yeah. How could you forget, right? But the team at Ronald Company was watching to see how is Russ going to handle this? How are we going to lead through this? So great leaders are not afraid to strengthen others. You're willing to get input, even if it's not what you want to hear. You keep the mission alive and well and the fire burning within you, and you lead with isopraxism. Because at the end of the day, why you lead is to keep the entity that you've been entrusted with by God alive and well as long as it's needed to be used in the kingdom of God. It's not about you. It's not about me.